Dad?
He's still with us. He's coming back.
Guys.
Comment. Subscribe to Recapss Horror.
At the beginning of the movie, an old man named George is seen with his leg chained, mumbling biblical verses. He speaks of God bringing diseases upon greedy humans who venture into lands that do not belong to them, aiming to wipe them off the face of the earth. Suddenly, George grabs someone, jolting Philip awake from his sleep. Hearing loud thuds from the barn, Philip rushes outside to meet his older brother Jake, who informs him that it has happened again, and shows that their cow has given birth to a deformed calf. As Philip walks away, Jake takes out his gun and shoots the calf to end its misery. In another part of the small town, Cole Nichols arrives at work and tells her boss Graham to stop sleeping in the garage, to which Graham reassures her it's temporary. But Cole insists her dad has offered him a place to stay. Graham replies, "Tell Max thanks, but I'm okay," to which Cole suggests he tell him himself. Later, Jake visits his younger brother Graham, who clearly isn't pleased to see him, and immediately asks him to leave. Jake tells Graham that he needs to come home, but Graham responds by telling him to drink his beer and get out. Jake then shows him a video on his phone where Philip is seen acting erratically, as if possessed. Graham asks, "What is that?" And Jake explains that at first he thought it was just nightmares or trauma, but it's Dad all over again. Graham insists that Philip needs to see someone, and he can't help, to which Jake replies, "Not until you see him first." Jake explains that it started with the radios and lights turning on by themselves, and then Philip began acting like their dad. One day, Philip is fine. The next, he's trying to kill him, and he doesn't remember any of it. Graham asks, "What do you want me to do?" To which Jake replies, "Maybe Philip will open up to you." When they arrive home, Graham notices crucifixes and comments that he thought Jake would have had enough of that stuff by now. Jake replies that sometimes they help, and he thinks Dad is scared of it now. Graham retorts, "Dad's dead," to which Jake responds, "So what?" In a flashback, their dad is seen trying to attack Graham, but Graham manages to calm him down. Suddenly, Jake asks Graham if he's okay. He then suggests Graham rest on the couch, since his old room is now a storage room. And before leaving, Jake says he's glad he is there. Later, Graham has a nightmare in which he sees his dad eating a raw chicken, and he wakes up suddenly, startled. When Graham comes outside, he asks Jake why he's keeping chickens in the coop. Jake replies that they're spooked and adds, "They might just be chickens, but they're not stupid." Graham asks, "What's that supposed to mean?" To which Jake asks, "Can't you feel it?" Graham says no, and Jake explains, he's still here. Ever since their dad died, the calves have been stillborn or deformed. Graham says, "This place is poison," and he told him to leave after their dad died. Jake asks, "How long does he think it will be before people start asking questions?" He then accuses Graham of having no trouble leaving and forgetting them, to which Graham replies that he was afraid, and he still is, and he doesn't need to be here to feel it. Later, when Graham meets Philip, he wishes him a happy birthday. As Philip puts on his shirt, Graham notices some marks under his armpit and asks about them, to which Philip says it's just an allergy. Graham later meets Philip at the coop, where Philip tells him that he can't remember anything about that night. Graham replies that he's here now if he wants to talk about it, to which Philip says he is not, reminding him that he left them to deal with the mess on their own. That evening, while Graham is in the washroom, he has a flashback to a moment from the past when he was with his father and brother, and they are all together, looking happy and carefree. Later that night, we see someone moving toward Phillips's room, whispering his name, and we see Phillips sitting on his bed. Graham suddenly wakes up, hearing someone calling Philip's name, and as he checks his phone, he hears thumping noises coming from outside. Confused, he gets up to investigate and realizes the sounds are coming from Philip's room. When he enters the room, he notices that Philip is not in his bed. Instead, he hears some strange noise coming from under the bed. And as he looks beneath, he gets startled, seeing a chicken flapping its wings frantically. Graham pulls the chicken out from under the bed and brings it out, where he finds another dead chicken nearby. As he approaches it, he notices yet another dead chicken right in front of the coop and hears a bone-cracking noise coming from inside. Perplexed, he goes to investigate and finds Phillip crouched there, eating raw chickens. As Graham moves closer, Phillip turns toward him and suddenly lunges, biting a chunk out of his chest. Hearing Graham's screams, Jake wakes up, and together they manage to drag Phillip back inside. When Graham tells Jake to call an ambulance, Jake insists that no one is allowed there. Suddenly, Jake becomes terrified as he sees something moving inside Phillip, and as the thing begins to emerge from Phillip's mouth, Jake tries to pull it out, but Phillip spits blood onto Jake's face and then vomits the creature out. Graham watches in horror as the creature moves away, and when he gets up, the door slams shut. After a while, they manage to get out of the room and begin searching for the creature. Just as they think it's gone, something drips onto Jake, and as he looks up, he realizes the creature is on the ceiling right above him. Both of them try to catch it, but the creature quickly moves from place to place. But after a frantic attempt, they finally manage to capture it. They lock the creature in a box and notice that it's growing. And Jake tells Graham he really picked the worst time to quit drinking. Graham stops him from drinking more, insisting they need to stay alert and get help since they don't even know what they're dealing with. To which Jake says no one is better equipped to handle this than they are, and explains that things are getting worse by the minute, so they can't just talk their way through it. In a flashback, we see Phillip bringing soup to his dad, who asks him if he is afraid. Phillip replies that he is not afraid of him and urges him to eat, saying it will help him regain his strength. George then calls him closer and says he left it too long, before suddenly grabbing him and growling. Phillip manages to break free and flee, but George says, "When I'm gone, who do you think it will come for next?" The next morning, Graham goes to Phillip's room, where Phillip tells him he shouldn't have come. Graham sits down and says he needs to hear it from him, to which Phillip replies that nothing has changed and that he's still with us. Graham asks what happened last night, to which Phillip turns to him and says he's coming back. Graham asks, "Are you saying that thing is Dad?" To which Phillip responds that he doesn't know, saying it's all just like a bad dream. Graham mentions that Jake said he was trying to kill him, but Phillip denies it, insisting, whatever it was, it's out of him now, and he wants to see it. He then turns again and pleads, "Untie me and let me help." Meanwhile, Jake goes to check the coop and finds that Phillip has killed all the chickens. And while Graham is cleaning up the mess that Phillip made last night, Phillip sets that creature free. Graham hears music playing from a radio in George's room, which has been sealed shut with wooden planks. Perplexed, he pries the door open and enters to investigate, where he finds his father's Bible. And as he opens it, Jake appears and asks what he's doing. Graham responds that he doesn't know, and Jake tells him that no one is supposed to be in there. Graham comments that it still smells like their father in the room, to which Jake replies, "There's nothing here for us." Later, while Jake is drunk, suddenly someone walks past him, startling him. Meanwhile, Graham checks his wound and is horrified to see that it has formed into the shape of an eye. Jake, hearing the radio playing, enters his father's room, and a flashback reveals George lying in bed, waking up to find Graham standing over him. Without a word, Graham places a pillow over George's face and smothers him to death. Graham then sits on the bed, feeling the weight of guilt for what he did, and as he picks up a bottle, a demonic version of George suddenly appears and attacks him. Jake tries to intervene, but is paralyzed with fear at the sight of his father's monstrous form. However, Phillip strikes George on the head, ultimately killing the demonic figure. Jake, in a frenzy, attacks Phillip, mistaking him for their father, but Graham intervenes, choking Jake until he loses consciousness to stop the attack. Phillip says that Jake wasn't himself, and Graham asks Phillip what he was doing in their father's room. Phillip asks, "What now?" To which Graham replies that the house is driving them all mad and insists they need to leave. Graham is taking Phillip somewhere when Phillip suddenly clutches his side, wincing in severe pain. He sees his hand covered in blood and tells Graham that something's wrong. Meanwhile, Cole is in Graham's garage when Graham suddenly appears, startling her, and he urgently tells her that she needs to get out of there now. Phillip vomits blood, and panicking, Graham tells Cole to keep an eye on Phillip and rushes off. Cole asks Phillip if it might be food poisoning, but Phillip says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately seek, and asks who can understand it. Meanwhile, Graham checks his wound and desperately tries to dig the creature out of his body. Cole calls emergency services to request an ambulance, but the car radio suddenly turns on. When she looks around, she realizes Phillip is missing, and as she searches for him, she hears a loud metal clang, and suddenly, Phillip appears out of nowhere. Cole rushes to Graham's office, where Graham asks her to stay put, but she asks him what's happening. Graham explains that Phillip bit him, but when she offers help, he insists he's fine. He adds that Jake believes Phillip is possessed, and only then do the hubcaps hanging on the walls begin to shake, and the lights flicker. The scene then reveals Phillip, now visibly possessed. As the hubcaps and other objects in the room begin to fly around wildly, Graham urgently tells Cole to get under the desk, while he hides behind a chair for protection. After a tense moment, when everything finally calms down, Graham tries to leave, but discovers that the door is locked. Outside, Phillip in a demonic voice says, "I want you." The door then opens on its own, and Graham tells Cole to follow him. He cautiously steps out, searching for Phillip and hearing unsettling metal thuds and creaks. He tells Cole they need to get out of there, but just then, Jack arrives with a gun, demanding to know where Phillip is. Graham says he doesn't know, and he isn't going to let him hurt Phillip anymore, but Jack counters that he's there to protect Phillip. Graham accuses Jack of being the reason they're in this situation, but Jack denies fault. Graham then tells Jack to shoot him and end their suffering, but Jack replies that he left them, to which Graham tells him that he couldn't do it then, and he can't do it now. Only then a demonic growl echoes, and Graham tells Jack that they need to find Phillip and asks Cole to go into the office. Cole refuses to stay, saying she's not part of their family, but Graham pleads with her to listen to him. Cole reluctantly goes into the office and asks Graham what she's supposed to do, to which Graham tells her that it's for her protection and then locks the door from the outside. Graham and Jake start searching for Phillip, and Graham tells Jake that the tongue got him thinking that if they can extract a piece of it, they might be able to draw the entire entity out. Jake questions why their father is doing this, to which Graham responds that it's not just their father, and he believes that this thing needs to grow inside them until it's strong enough to survive on its own. After a while, they hear indistinct speaking over the radio, which clearly says, "The disease and I are now one." As Graham checks the radio, Jake points in a direction, and they spot Phillip hanging on a wall. Graham instructs Jake to help get him down, and as they approach, Jake warns, "This is not Phillip." When they get closer, Phillip turns to them and growls menacingly, causing them to rush forward to catch him as he falls. They manage to bring him down, and after a struggle, successfully restrain him by tying his hands and legs with chains. Graham tries to calm Phillip down and checks his arm, only to be horrified by the sight of the entity present there. Phillip grabs Graham and accuses him of killing him, but Graham pleads with his father to let Phillip go, and just as Jake pulls Graham away, Phillip growls menacingly. Jake asks, what should they do now? To which Graham suggests they need to make a crucifix. Later, Jake asks Graham if he really thinks the crucifix will work, given that they aren't believers, to which Graham replies that their father was. He adds that Phillip feels they waited too long, and that their dad stuck his last memory of them. Suddenly, they hear the clanking of chains, prompting them to rush out of the car to confront Phillip. Phillip cries out for help, and just as Graham is about to tell him something, someone bangs on the door. Jake goes to check and finds police outside, so he returns to tell Graham that the cops are at the door. Graham and Jake then move Phillip into the kitchen, and Graham instructs Jake to go to Cole while he deals with the police. Graham rushes in and snatches Cole's phone and then breaks the landline phone, cutting off all communication. Meanwhile, Phillip gets up and struggles as the creature tries to emerge from his armpit. At the same time, Graham attempts to handle the situation with the officers, assuring them that he didn't make any calls and that everything is fine. While he's preoccupied with the officers, the entity completely emerges from Phillip, leaving him in a terrifying state. Officer Peters insists that Graham let them in to investigate, to which Graham warns them that it's not a safe place, but Peters reassures him that they will be careful. The officers enter the garage and start their investigation, and as they do, the creature continues to take on a more human-like form, further escalating the tension and danger in the scene. Now, when Officer Terry enters the kitchen, he steps on the slime left by the creature, and he finds Phillip sitting scared in a corner. Phillip tells him to get out of there, and only then the officer notices the creature hiding behind a curtain. Meanwhile, Peters enters Graham's office, and we see Jake holding Cole at gunpoint, hiding behind a cabinet. Just then, Terry screams, prompting Peters to rush to the kitchen, only to find the door locked, and we see the creature attacking and killing Terry inside. In the chaos, Jake attacks Peters, accidentally shooting himself in the foot. Leaving Jake with Cole, Graham heads to the kitchen, where he finds Terry's lifeless body and Phillip huddled in a corner. Phillip insists he didn't do it, and Graham reassures him that it's okay. He helps Phillip up, brings him out of the kitchen, and seats him next to Jake, assuring him that he is safe. Cole says she's going to get a drink, and Jake asks her to bring him something as well. As she leaves, Phillip asks if they get it, and when Graham asks him to clarify, Phillip replies, he is here. Meanwhile, Cole encounters the creature and is horrified by its appearance. As the creature begins to advance on her, Graham arrives and urgently tells Cole to back away and leave. The creature picks up a pipe that resembles the one Phillip used to kill his father. Jack urges Graham to end it now, and as the creature approaches them, Graham tells his brother to leave. But Jack insists they should do it together. Graham aims his gun at the creature's head and is overcome by memories of their father. In the flashback, George expresses his weariness and uncertainty about how long his thoughts will remain his own. He explains that soon there will be nothing left but the disease, which has its own mind and lacks empathy. He says he sees a monster in the mirror every day and fears that as it grows, he will disappear. George wants to die on his own terms, with his family by his side. He takes a blood oath with them, expressing his desire to avoid seeing the end coming. He insists that they must end his life together, fearing what he will become if they wait too long. Graham, overwhelmed, tells George he doesn't know what he's asking them, but George insists the time has come. Graham, despite his deep grief and guilt, pulls the trigger and shoots the creature. He then tells Cole to leave, assuring her that they will be fine from here, but Cole insists on staying. Jack asks Graham what's wrong, and Graham reveals that it's not over yet. He leaves, instructing Jack to look after them. Jack follows him, attempting to stop him, but Graham reminds him of the blood oath they took and locks himself in the office. Graham tries to shoot the entity within him, but his brothers and Cole rush in to stop him. Jack struggles to extract the creature from Graham's chest, and after a fierce battle, he successfully removes it and shoots it dead. As the police sirens wail in the distance, Cole suggests that they need to leave immediately. They all pile into Graham's car, and as they drive away from the house, Cole asks where they are heading. Graham tells her to keep driving and not to stop, and the car speeds off into the night, leaving the horrors of the house behind them. In a mid-credit scene, something crawls slowly around their abandoned house, leaving behind a trail of slime, revealing the severed tongue of the creature, which Graham had pulled out of Phillip's body.